common theme in the world that we live in, which is rooted in the theme of control. We can see that in so many different systems, political, economic. Oh my gosh, it's like, and then drill it down into like relationships, professional, family dynamics. There's the potential to carry the theme of control. If we want you to do something a certain way because it will then benefit either the greater good of maybe the team at work, or maybe it's for the love of an individual that we have. And so for the betterment of that, we can fall into the trap of wanting to control them without any necessarily malicious intent. Of course, there's obviously control in the world of the malicious theme, where it's rooted in fear and pain that they pull on for control to happen. And as you probably see through the world, when we control or we see others control through the lines of fear and pain, it can create a lot of suffering. It does create a lot of suffering for that person and the people they are trying to control, right? And sometimes we've gotten caught up in those dynamics unintentionally or unexpectedly. It's just out of our control, and all of a sudden we're like, oh, this is what's going on. I don't know if I like this. So there is another way that I want to present to you guys today, which is letting go of this tug of war of control. Because, like, I take the example of me growing up with my dad. He wanted to control, as a form of a word, what I was to grow up and become. He wanted a doctor, a lawyer, a very Asian cultural stereotype, and wanted me to have this like long career in one of those like corporate companies, which I don't know how that actually aligns with being a doctor or lawyer, and then like retire and have a gold watch. Like that was his absolute dream for me. And when I heard that at the age of when I was going to college, I thought that was mortifying. And I thought that would suck my soul to the death of me. And I felt a sense of like him wanting to control what I wanted to do in my life. And so that control was met with, from my behaviors, a lot of rebellion, a lot of resistance, a lot of pushback, right? And it became this tug of war that we would go into within our relationship. He'd pull like, you got to be a doctor or a lawyer. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. And I would go the other way. Whatever was the opposite of which way he was pulling. And so this game that we can fall into, this control game, could be fun for some people, but I kind of got sick and tired of it. I wanted a different option. So this is why I'm presenting this different option for you guys. Is there's a piece called connection instead of control. And when we play the game of connection, this also occurs when you are training on the martial arts mat. That when you fall into the trap of wanting to control the attacker that is attacking you, that is grabbing you, that is trying to put you in some joint lock or some, position that would essentially end the wrestling game, if you will. In jiu-jitsu, they talk about submitting your opponent, right? So I feel like submitting has a very strong theme of control around that. But in the world of Aikido, martial arts philosophy, there is really trying to bridge a harmonious, peaceful relationship in the dynamic, martially when you're on the mat. And in that really comes about through connection. Because when we let go of trying to control someone, there are components that occur through connection. One of them, first off, is we let go of being externally focused on the other person, external circumstances and situation, and we become internally focused. So we bring the attention back to ourselves, and we recognize and we look at the situation and says, what do we have control with in this current situation? So it becomes self-control, right? And self-control can be a very powerful thing, because this is how we demonstrate, or we put into place behaviors, actions, words, right? It becomes the right body, speech, and mind. And that's within our control. My speech is within my control, the words that I say, right? The behaviors that I do, right? Whether I'm going to hug someone or whether I'm going to like slap them or punch them is within my control, right? And the deeper focus, right, around our practice is the mindfulness practice that really focuses on the thoughts we think. And also the contemplation part of seeing what the patterns of the thoughts we think, and wondering like, am I trapping myself into an unhealthy and or dynamic of suffering, right? Like, am I falling into that trap of that control tug of war? So when we work on connection, we come back to this initial connection with ourselves. That self-control and recognizing, okay, what is within my resources that I can do? And I think some people forget that when they cultivate boundaries. They're like, okay, I'm setting healthy boundaries. Okay, don't talk to me that way. I don't like that tone of voice. That's okay. We think that we've set a healthy boundary. We put a fence in our yard and therefore don't cross my fence, right? But actually, setting a boundary is really coming back to ourselves and asking ourselves within this concept of self-control, what am I willing to deal with? What am I not willing to tolerate? Right? And so if someone's throwing punches, my boundary is I don't walk within the realm of their punching space so I don't get hit. Right? I stay outside of that impact zone, right? And that is a healthy boundary for myself. So the healthy boundary comes from a place of self-control. The second piece in connection that gets really lost, I feel like, in today's age, because there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of information, and we're connected, technologically with each other so deeply that we forget to be receptive. And it's a real strong component in connection. And receptivity for me can sound like or look like being able to really listen and hear where the other person is coming from or what they're saying. And that receptivity, that openness really is having to let go of our own agenda of how we think things should be or what we think is the right thing. Because when we become receptive to really hearing what they're saying, there's a lot of information that can come through. A tremendous amount of information. And I think a lot of times, and I see it within myself, we become overloaded and bombarded with information or communication from all sorts of people that we jump to conclusions. It's like, oh, I'm not feeling so, oh my gosh, you hear someone's response if they're not feeling so good and your head jumps into like, oh, I'm going to be listening to like a hour-long complaint of whatever it is. Right? So we've stopped the process of being receptive. We stopped the ego kind of jumping in, hijacking and taking it off to some storyline, which might be true, but it might not, right? There's infinite possibilities in that scenario. So when we stay receptive, that receptivity is really an aspect of present moment, being present. And I know sometimes that can be difficult with all the things that we're juggling. So the present really is, in this receptivity piece, there is that compassionate component that naturally arises. And sometimes, doesn't feel supernatural for me to just jump right into compassion for an individual. Sometimes if I have to kind of remind myself, I tap into compassion for myself first, right? Of like, okay, when I feel like I'm having not a great day and I go to my loved one and I'm asking them to listen, I would really, appreciate a real like present, aware individual being concerned and listening to me, right? And so from that compassionate space of wanting that for myself, how can I offer that to this individual that I'm having this interaction with? So the compassion is another component on the connection piece, the overarching theme of connection. And what I feel like when we are engaging in this process, it kind of like spits out, if you will. It's like, you put one of those like old cartoon things where you like put in something on one end of the machine and it does this all like boop, 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 and then it like spits out something else that's completely different, whether it's like a mathematical equation or something. I'm thinking maybe like the Jetsons or something, which is like, I know, a super old cartoon where they might like put in a little like brown box of something in their machine. All of a sudden it comes out like a feast on the other side for the whole family with like turkey and salad and all this stuff. So what it kind of brings us to is the aspect of skillful means and around this space and place of connection, this process of connection. And skillful means, as I understand it, is the appropriate action, the appropriate right action, right speech, right thought in that moment for that situation. So I feel like skillful means is like Buddhism's way of lawyers speak when they say it depends. You're like, so if this is this and this is happening, does that mean I'll get this X amount of money from some situation? And the lawyer will be like, well, it depends, right? There's always this gray area. So skillful means, I feel like, is that not gray area, but it is this infinite space of possibilities to address a situation, a relationship, a dynamic that is occurring that is not set in a black and white, very rigid kind of limited process. Because what may be appropriate in that moment can look very different for myself or you or someone else. So this brings us back full circle to this super importance of having the cornerstones of our practice in place, meditation and mindfulness, because it helps us stay honest, like genuinely, thoroughly honest, self-honesty within ourselves, to really cut through maybe any BS that we're trying to tell ourselves, BS that we're trying to tell other people to have them co-sign for us. I love that, co-signing people's BS. I don't know if you've ever had that occur in your life, like something's happening in the relationship and they're like, did you move my glasses? You did that to me. It's like, nope, don't blame me for that. You have to take responsibility for your own actions, right? I'm not going to co-sign that BS kind of thing. So through self-honesty, we really generate a healthy sense of accountability and responsibility in our life to really perpetuate integrity in our actions and our speech and our thoughts. And of course, it's not perfection, and that's not, what is being stated here. Integrity, I feel like, is doing the best that we can with what we have in every moment, and that each moment will look different. If you go for a run today and you feel so great because you had a wonderful night's rest, that run is going to look different when you were slogging through a long day. You barely had any sleep, right? And you felt like maybe your food intake was off and you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm slogging through mud, right? So the quality of situations will differ, but that's not to say that by implementing our best, being impeccable in doing our best for every situation, that allows the integrity component as well as the self-honesty, right? These pieces are kind of like interlocking together like a watch clock as the gears affect each other. That the integrity and the self-honesty allows us to be better at skillfully addressing a situation or a conversation, from a place of connection instead of control. And I think if we really, really take an honest look in our lives, we can really recognize the lie of control. Because I feel like the truth is we don't have any control over people, places, or things. Yet the ego and the world that we live in is set up to feel like we do. So that we know that tomorrow is going to happen. So then we feel some kind of sense of, lessened anxiety. But we have no control over that. What instead we have is we have this ability to connect with the people, places, and things around us. And through that connection, there is immense influence, right? You see that in, I'm sure, many situations and positions where people have a certain amount of leadership or power, right? That their ability to connect with people, places, and things can foster real beauty and light. It can really foster good things, and it really can influence positive things to happen. Yeah, I agree. And it's almost like a shock to the system, because we lost that connection. It was like vacuum sucked away, right? And all of a sudden it's kind of like tsunami back to else. So pretty crazy how resilient we are. Just so amazing, right? As these beings of balls of light with bags of flesh and goop and all that stuff included. Yeah. So as I'm sure all of us have gone through in our own way, this, that lack of connection, or that vacuum, for real legitimate reasons, life or death situations, health and illness and all that stuff like that from the pandemic, it really highlights how much we don't have control. And it's just sometimes funny and fascinates me how, I feel like I absolutely changed so much from that pandemic and kind of assimilating back into the world now with the connections that you're talking about. I feel I see certain individuals trying to implement the same structure before the pandemic into this current one. It's like, okay, I have to go back to work in the office 46 hours a week and this, and I have to churn it out and I'm going to sit in traffic. And, it's like it has to be, they're trying to put that structure back into now. And I just caution people, if they're doing that, to really have a real contemplative, mindful approach of like, is that the skillful means to this current moment? And if it is for you, great. But if it's not, what is it that we need to then adjust in our life? What do we have self-control over to shift and change and move? Because, yeah, I'm definitely not about sitting in traffic, especially living in California. No, thanks. But in addition to that, just the busyness, I feel like some people feel like they're trying to make up for lost time. And for sure, there's a lot of lost things, and to reconnect is not a bad thing. But sometimes I feel like the connection can get lost in the busyness of like, I need my social calendar packed again. It's like, whoa, okay, if that works for you. I tend to be more introverted, so I find my replenishment and energy from more solitude time. So that's just where I come from. But going back to the connection piece, I'm glad you guys are seeing the correlation to where we are right now. And connection actually is such a, I feel like, needed. I almost can say it's like a healing component to where we are in the world. There's so many divisive factions, that people can go into and fall into that trap of pointing the finger like they're the bad guys. And we feel a little bit better about ourselves because we're not over there being pointed at as the bad guy. But when we go back to like the example with the conversation with my dad and myself, it's like, I thought he was the bad guy and he thought I was the bad guy, who's really the bad guy. And it comes down to, letting go of that control, letting go of the labels, the judgments, and meeting people where they're at, meeting the situation where they're at from a space of connection. Yeah. So awesome. My clients use the phrase that, you start to let them rent space in your head, and they're not paying rent. So so you better check it out what you're letting other people do, right? And that becomes your own self-control and boundary of like, nope, I'm not letting them rent any space in my mind. Yeah. Oh, good. I love it. I guess I just want to finish and close off with letting you guys in on a little secret around the whole connection piece versus the control is when we are able to be fully receptive, like listening, body, mind, and spirit to whatever is happening in the situation. Even when it's difficult, even when it's challenging, when we can really be receptive and listen, the answers are already there. And when we are able to be patient enough to let the answers reveal themselves, it really cuts out a lot of work that we have to try to do. I have to come up with a super smart, intelligent, solution for this situation. And I say, don't even worry about complicating it like that. Just stay receptive and listening. And when we practice that technique, if you will, with others, what ends up happening is we end up learning to listen and be receptive more to ourselves in a very present, honest, authentic way. So I hope you can see that it becomes this kind of mutually beneficial cycle, of in the realm of connection. And that I feel like fosters the interconnectedness, it's like for the benefit of all beings. It's like everyone wins.